Hello, everybody. How are you? So excited to be talking to Chris. He's one of the most fascinating entrepreneurs I follow. I've been following him for actually many years, and I always was amazed how direct and frank he is with his thoughts. In US, we are very politically correct. We're afraid to touch on something uncomfortable, but Chris just keeps hammering the truth, and I find it always so refreshing. And so I'm so excited to be talking to him. And he has an amazing company called Blackthorn, and it's a company that is generating $16 million a year in revenue and is currently valued at $160 million. I find this number amazing. And among his customers, he has our universities, world-class universities, Ivy League universities like Columbia University, MIT, and world-class companies like Expedia, Virgin Airlines, Audi, and one of my four favorite speakers, whom I just saw actually 2 weeks ago, is also his customer, Tony Robbins. And so he has achieved all this over the last 8 years. Chris, can you talk about some of the key figures that highlight the success of Blackthorn?
Yeah. And before I forget to say thanks for so much for having me on here. I know that you looked at a lot of my stuff prior and that's great. So it'll be pretty interesting here. We have a lot of miscellaneous stuff. We've got about 100 people and we've never had a real office. We had like a little co-working thing of like 3 people at some point. But we're in 25 states and 15 countries. And we process about 1.5 billion of payments a year currently, but it's growing kind of rapidly. We got about 630 customers, and we have just about 100 universities, mostly US, but some Australia and Europe. And that's across our 5 Salesforce applications that we have.
That's amazing how much you have achieved in 8 years. So many employees, so many people, families you are supporting. The thing that I find most amazing is how did this get started?
I'll take it back a little further. I started working at Internet Creations, which is now Picasso, in early 2011. And I was doing a lot. I was like the main Salesforce admin because they didn't really have like an admin consultant then per se, as well as doing sales and marketing and working with the Salesforce reps and then doing some of the product work. It was a small company. It was like 7 people then. Then I helped them grow it to like 25 people. I was there for 2 years. Then I went to Silverline and made a lot of, they just sold last week actually, or earlier this week. I made a lot of relationships with Salesforce reps there. And then I got fired from there. Unenjoyable, but happened. So now I always know what it's like to get fired if I fire anyone. It really sucks. And I knew that I could do Salesforce implementation work. So I reached out to the reps that I had made relationships with. I said, "Hey, give me all of like your smallest, crappiest deals no one else wants. I'll charge them 5 to 10K, which is like no company really wants 5K deals. You can't like staff it, you can't grow it, but they're really good if you're a single person company." Sold a bunch of those, sold like 120K of deals in the first like, I don't know, 3 months or something like that, which as a person like working by yourself, it's a lot. And I couldn't deliver like all the stuff on myself. So I started to get contractors, and I partnered with Nishad then, and that company was CRM Passport, which became GSD, which is now called Plative. Now they have like, I don't know, 200 people now or something. And year and a half in, this third guy comes along and says, let's create 2 companies. Let's have one that has apps and one that has services, and they'll like feed each other because apps doesn't make money for a long time. And I said, okay. So I knew that there was a gap for doing payments on Salesforce. There were some apps that were existing. They're still out there, but you have to do a lot of work to them to get to do like a lot of the basic things. But primarily, none of them integrated with Stripe at the time. So we thought to do a payments integration that integrated with Stripe. And then my co-founder at the time wanted to do the same thing with events, because that thing as a concept, the technology at the time like really wasn't so good. So we put events on top of payments. So all of our events customers are actually payments customers. We use it as the payment layer. So that's kind of how it happened. But we had no idea who we were going to be servicing. We just knew that there was a technology gap. We didn't know like who the target verticals or what the go-to-market was going to be.
So it's a very interesting that you worked at a bunch of these companies that are now pretty big that I've heard of, and I've even used their products like Internet Creations. I forgot the kind. They have like a case management app.
Yeah,
I
they
think
have
I've
a email to case premium. Yeah. They
Yeah.
have one app, Case Flags, that didn't exist. And I sold this one deal and they really needed it. So as part of the deal, we built that app. So I was helping them put that thing together. And Internet Creations was made by a bunch of people that went to high school together. So I went to high school with the founder. And
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
he'd been running the company for like 20 years before I joined. Like that was his thing. I just came in to help out with the Salesforce stuff.
Like all these companies you worked at, they became famous, and it's
This is random
like.
how that works, but a lot of Salesforce companies have grown pretty significantly.
And how did you get the idea to start this company? Like, what motivated you to start this company? Do you just like to start things, create things? Are you a creator in nature, and you don't want to have a boss? Or like Elon Musk says he couldn't get a job at Mozilla, so he thought like he'll have to start a company.
I, for better or for worse, I'm a very irritable person. It's hard for me to work for someone. I always end up having some kind of issues with someone, so I'm unemployable as I'm told. So, but even when I was younger, I wanted to start something. Like in college, they had this sub study for doing entrepreneurship, and I did that thing. I tried to start some stuff along the way. I tried to start like 3 or 4 different companies before, and they all failed. And I kept taking jobs at different places, and I really didn't know what the heck I was going to do. But a good way for someone to start a company is if you get good at something, then you can do consulting in that line of work. You first have to have the skill, and then you have to be able to like get the clients or get the deal somewhere, right? So then you can start by yourself. And if you're an individual with no kids, your expenses are pretty low. It's a nice foray to break into doing something on your own. But then making the app business, I wanted to do apps because consulting is tiring. It's very tiring. You constantly juggle between projects. You never get to stay on the same thing for a long time to make it grow into something quite big. You're always juggling multiple projects at once. It's hard to keep customers happy like consistently. There's just it's tough business. So people that succeed at that, I have a lot of respect for them because it's really quite hard. And I always was more interested in doing the tech side of things. And in consulting, when you do the tech stuff, you get to like do a little bit, then you go to something else, but you never really get to build on a singular thing. So now, even in the company now, I have very little to do with sales. I'm focused mostly on the product and engineering side.
So one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons why you started is because you felt you were unemployable, and
I know I'm unemployable. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I also find it fascinating when you say that you got fired. Like no one says they ever get fired in life. Like no one admits to it. I'm sure a lot of people get fired, but no one admits to it. But
it always depends upon the circumstances by which someone gets fired. I think something about getting fired is shameful, and a lot of people don't want to address something that's shameful because it's usually has some kind of pain or something with confidence. And there were a number of deals that I was involved with that went south for one reason or another. There was a really big project that I scoped. It was like a 350K project or something, which at the time that was really big one for me to scope. And I wasn't the only person working the deal. There were multiple people. There was a system that got missed in the scoping. And when we start, the SOW was like 10 pages long. It was extremely detailed. The customer missed it. I missed it in the scoping. Everybody missed this part of it. And it became a big problem because that additional integration was like another 100K or something, right? But the whole thing got pinned on me, which I personally missed it for sure. But there were like a lot of people that missed it as well. So, but then another issue was I was put on a deal where I really didn't understand the business vertical. I told everyone I didn't understand the business vertical. They said, you'll be fine. I went in the meeting and I was absolutely horrible, as expected. So, I could have just said, look, you don't put me in there. I don't really know. So there were a number of things that happened that were certainly my fault. But I think the fault was a bit shared. And I ended up being the person that got fired. A few months later, my boss that fired me was fired. And a lot of people were either fired or left from there. I think they cycled in and out like half the staff. And I think it was probably part of like a culture change they had at Silverline at some point where I think at some point maybe they hired rather quickly, and a lot of the people that were there didn't fit maybe some of the mold of how management was functioning. And we ran into a lot of that ourselves, actually. The people that work at a 10-person company are very different from a 30 or 100-person company. So we had a lot of issues with hiring where there's a lot of people no longer at the company, and a lot of them aren't there because of personality clashes, where it's not like necessarily a fault of their ability to execute. It was like them like conflicting with people at the company. So hiring's a really hard thing to figure out. Like that, I think a lot of what happened at Solarline also happened with us, and I'd imagine it happens at a lot of companies that add a lot of people quickly.
When you were starting Blackthorn, you had skills having worked in the Salesforce space for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have money?
I had about 30K saved personally, and my runway was more or less 3 months. My expenses weren't 10K, but it was like my runway was like 3 months. I had like 3 months until I really had a problem. So I figured I'll try to launch this business for 2 months. And if I can't figure it out in the next month, I'll get a job. Because in 2014, like even now, but like really so in 2014, if you were like a good admin with connections, you could get a job in like a week. Because everybody really needed consultants for their projects. It was a huge shortage. So I wasn't worried about getting a job, but I figured, I'll throw up a website, I'll call my connections and see if they have any really small deals they want me to do. And I sold a whole bunch of these 5K, 6K deals, which, if you're on your own, that's a lot.
You can do a whole bunch of deals in parallel, right?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you can. Depends upon the customer's timeline. If they want you in there every single day, full day for 2 weeks, then not really. But if they're like, let's have a meeting for 2 hours, and then next week let's have another meeting for 2 hours, then you certainly can.
So you had some money, you had the skills, and that gave you enough confidence you can succeed?
No, it gave me enough time to test it.
Test it. I
had no idea. I knew I could do the work and I knew I could get the deals, but until the money's in the bank, like it doesn't really exist.
You wanted to figure it out, and
I wanted to figure it out. Yeah, it's very hard because I live in New York City, and people that live in New York City that are successful tech sales reps, they make a lot of money. So my friends were making 250 to 350K a year or much more for years, and I was taking home 50 to 100K, which, in and of itself is not bad. But if you're living in New York City making 50K, like you can barely cover your rent and then like do anything. So my friends would go to these restaurants and I'm like, guys, I can't go to this restaurant, or like, I can't pay for this. So I would always try to suggest like really cheap restaurants to try to go to hang out with them. Now, granted, I'm not discussing like poverty here, right? This isn't like, these aren't massive problems, but it's hard to look at a scenario that would immediately get me paid more money, right? Like I could go get one of these jobs and get paid 250K. Whereas I'm just like consistently taking home this like 50, it was 80K for like 2 years. And then we raised it to like 100 and then 120K for a while. And then like, it couldn't really go much beyond that for a long time because we really didn't have money. So it's very hard to look at my friends making all this money for years. And I felt like I was being an idiot.
I used to live in New York City, and I was making $56,000, and I was living in like a little room, and I was like 20.
Exactly. Yeah, your bed's probably touching at least 2 walls, probably 3.
Now you've been in your experiment, your hard work, sacrifices have paid off because you've built a company that is valued at $160 million. I think it's totally incredible, and with a similar trajectory of growth and hard work, maybe in 10 years it'll be $1 billion company. And
I hope I'm not doing this in 10 years.
All right, the company will be then, even if you're not.
Yeah.
The trajectory that you put it on. You know a lot of people in the Salesforce industry. You've seen a lot of companies grow. You yourself have worked at a whole bunch of these startups that have become very successful, very famous. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to hear your advice to someone who wants to build a Salesforce app, who wants to build a Salesforce app that will grow big. What are 5 suggestions you would give them?
It's much harder to do it now than it was, like 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, because if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of apps in the App Exchange. But the first one I would say is start your review as soon as you can. So have a dev org, make some objects, make some fields, get the basic concept of what you're trying to do, and then add a little something. Put a lightning component in there, put in a flow, put in a trigger in a class, something that says like, okay, I have an app that like does something, and then submit the thing for security review. And then you go into like a 6-month process to actually get the thing through. And during that 6 months, just keep building your app, because the security review and the demo of your app, these things don't really matter. Salesforce wants to make sure that whatever goes on their app exchange actually is doing something, which your app will be doing, and has the potential to get them some money for their revenue share, which they'll be doing, right? So they don't want like something on there that is somehow malicious or bad or whatever. So as long as it does a little bit, like get it started, because time is money. The more time that goes by, your amount of money will dwindle until this thing's ready. The second is, once the thing is live, you have to sell this. So it helps to obviously do marketing, but the Salesforce ecosystem, even though it's big, it's still kind of small. So whatever it is you're making the app in, you want to try to meet Salesforce system integrators that could potentially recommend your application if it's something that they would bring in as part of a project that they're doing. If it's something that's more direct to customer, you have to figure out where those customers are living. Are they in G2? Do they listen to podcasts? Are they going to events of a specific verticalized nature? So you can try to get in that way. It's nearly impossible to work with the Salesforce reps. You can more or less like forget about that as a strategy, unless it's exceptionally niche. So if you have some like general purpose application, you're never going to get the mind share of like the core AEs. But if you're in education or nonprofit or financial services or automotive or like healthcare, whatever, then you can target it, get to know, some of the reps that are in there. You're not going to do an enterprise deal on day one. Like they're not going to buy from you. They're not going to recommend you, but you can get to know some of the reps in there and like get top of mind with them. That's possible. Another one is you have to try to get your app used. So anywhere you can get your app into any organization, anything in life that you make new is based on a thesis. You could build a building on the corner in your city, and you think the rent should be $3,000, but people really want to pay $2,000, or you think you need this kind of range, but people hate it and they want a different one. When you make your app, you have a thesis of what you want based upon whatever education or experience you have, but your customers might actually want something different. So the sooner you can start to get customers is really going to help. Jason Lemkin says, if you can get your app into the hands of 10 uncorrelated customers, then it will really help to prove that your app is, solving what you're trying to do. Our events app was impossible to figure out what the thing was going to do. We didn't start to really understand what features we needed to have until we had done around 100 demos with customers, because every single one had different feature requests and we couldn't aggregate them. So you really had to have as many customers as you can. Now, that doesn't mean give the app away for free, because you're not going to be able to pay yourself. So companies have money. And the problem with giving it away for free is, how do you charge for it then in the future? You're just going to give it for free for them forever? No, because eventually you're going to have a lot of staff you have to pay. So for early people, you can give them a deal, right? If you think your app will eventually sell for $30K a year, maybe say, hey, like, we know you're early. Let's do a deal at $15K a year, and you're going to get unbelievable support like you've never seen. Like your CEO is going to be on your support calls. It's going to be like crazy support. Any feature you want, we're going to make it for you, right? You have to be like kind of crazy. But then you could do a multi-year stair step kind of deal. So you'll say, year 2, you're going to be 20K. Year 3, you're going to be 25K. And you could bake that into the contract, something like that. And you could say, at the end of the year 1, you have the right to leave. We know we're new, you can leave. But if you renew, this is going to be the price, something like that. So at least you bake in what the future pricing is going to do. And then for your app, if you think about hiring someone in the US, you have to assume the cost is going to be 80 to 130K, right? If you hire someone in another country doing some kind of dev or admin work where their cost of living is a lot less, maybe their cost is anywhere from 40 to 90K. So somewhere in there, when you start growing your company, you have support people, you have product, you have accounting, you have marketing, you have sales, you have like all this stuff besides all your engineers and QA. You're going to need a lot more people than you will have money. So in consulting, it's like chicken or the egg. You take a project, you get people. You get people, you get a project. But in apps, you need a lot of people before your app like does anything.
Mm.
So it helps to try to make friends with people that have some money. Try to meet as many people as you can that can write you like a 10K, 20K, 30K check, and do like small angel rounds if you can. Raising money right now is particularly very hard. So if you plan on having a small app just for one person and you're going to get consulting work out of it, fine. If you have like a little add-on that's going to be like a Chrome extension and do something else, plenty of people make these single person apps and they make a lot of money. Some of them make hundreds of thousands or millions a year as like a one person company. It's not unheard of. It's also not common. So when you go to make an app, you're probably not going to have the skill set of everything. If you're an incredible dev, you probably stink at sales. If you're great at sales, you're probably not a dev, right? Of course, there's exceptions. It happens, but like you got to find people. So if you can make friends with people that can write you some checks and then start to get to meet some people that have like seed funds, to raise a seed round, you're going to have to pitch at least 100 seed investors. That's like the minimum number that you should expect. So it really takes a lot of time. And I think the fifth thing I would say, once you have a customer, get as many reviews as you can. Just because it's one customer doesn't mean it's one review. You can have like 5 users at the company that would leave you 5 reviews, and try to get 5-star reviews. And what I say to people is, can you leave us a 5-star review? If for some reason it would be a 4-star review, can you not leave the review yet? And let's have a meeting about why it wouldn't be a 5-star review. Is there something we could change? Maybe our sales process is no good. Our support process is no good. Maybe our feature release isn't quick enough, or maybe we're missing some key feature, or maybe something with the product is too hard. Like there's always something. And then meet with them, and you can often, get that fixed. And other times we've gotten 2-star, 3-star, 4-star reviews, and I'll contact them and say, hey, you left this review that wasn't so good. Can we talk? We'll talk and we'll work on whatever it is that they mentioned, and then they'll go back in and edit their review. So these things have all like really helped.
Wow, a lot of great ideas. And
these are all the things we either did or did wrong, and they worked, or this is what we learned.
I watched one of your videos at a conference, like some kind of SaaS conference, where you talk about your app and how you grew the company, like the revenue, and how you acquired certain companies.
This was Nathan Laka's conference. Yeah.
I was very interested to hear about the single person apps. I didn't even know that there was these single person apps, and they were very inspiring to me. I'm like, wow, so cool. Even if I have a single person, and if I have a little company, maybe someone will come and buy it to me. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Matt Parker had one which is now our compliance app. He called it PCI-Fi, and he had like 130K of revenue. So he was a sole person doing it. He was making like 130K. He had like 30 customers. And then Clint, his name's Clint, and he made the Texty application. But he had a team of people that was helping him to accelerate stuff. So we're still working with that team. They help us do like some dev and some QA work. They're called CRMified. They're pretty good. But he got his company up to something like 500, 550K, something like that. But granted, he was paying this other team to do their thing. So they had their annual contract, and they had a few people. But he was making a pretty good living doing like single person applications. So when we bought the companies, I said, hey, do you want to stay on? They're like, absolutely not. I want to go do something else. I'm like, okay. So that makes it easy. And, I played with the apps before I bought them, obviously. And they didn't need like some kind of like huge integration work, right? We did like a little bit of stuff, and now they like work great, and they complement our stack really well.
Last question, Chris, on this topic. What are the common mistakes that app founders make when they on their journey to build a Salesforce app? Can you give us 3 most common mistakes that you see?
Yeah. One is they wait way too long to submit to the App Exchange, because once your app gets sufficiently big, the first time you do, you will have so many problems that they will make you fix. It will just drown you, and you just won't get to go through it. Imagine if you had to review 1 trigger or 20, or 1 class or 20 classes. It just becomes way too big. I think that would be like the first one. The second one, I think, is a lot of problem architecture decisions. For example, if you have a junction object with like 2 master detail relationships coming off of that object, do you know what it's like to migrate data into that object? This is a disaster. Or what it's like to query data in that object. You'll get endless row lock errors. Like if you haven't worked in an org that has 1 million contacts, or has an incredible amount of automation running and things that are running async, You're going to get Apex limit timeouts because the queries are going on too long. You're going to get problems when you run out of in-memory cache. The roll-lock things happen when you query from an outside API or when you're doing any kind of integration work, which I guess is maybe the same thing as doing with the API. If you have any kind of packaged roll-ups, sometimes those can get strung onto something running from a flow, or that can also be the source of roll-locks. Those become a mess. So now we steer clear of any master detail relationships. We do as much as we can asynchronously. We have like across our whole stack, maybe there's like 150 objects or something. I think there's 2 master detail relationships, and they snuck in there and they're there now. But outside of that, there's none. So I guess another one is see if the architecture can work in sufficiently big orgs, because it very well probably won't. And a third thing, really not sure, to be honest. I think those are the only 2 that come to mind.
I thought you would talk about something about like not finding customers or pricing too low or
Pricing too low is a big problem, actually. In our Stripe environment, there's something like 932 prices we've had for our payments app. I've really played around with it for a long time. And the problem with founders is they price their app too low consistently. They'll say like, it took me 6 months to make. Here's how much time I think it would be, and here's how much it should be. Right? That's like the mentality that goes into it. That's not what it is. So if a company was to buy it tomorrow, they can be live in a heartbeat, and you've already thought through all these problems they have. And the reality is that when you have a big company, it takes them a really long time to make something because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of use cases, there's a lot of bureaucracy they have to go to. You need a champion. If the champion's wrong, the champion gets fired sometimes. So it's a lot easier for them to buy an app. So if you made something in 6 months, there's no reason you can't sell it for 50K a year, 100K a year, right? But like when we initially priced the payments app, it was free for a long time. And then we made it 3K a year, 4K a year, right? That same app with like customers now, it's 20X, 30X. I mean, you got to think too, though. Number one, we're still not profitable. We're going to be profitable around maybe like 18, 19 million, something like this, maybe like 19. So we're almost there. We did a big debt facility. So we hired a lot of people ahead of revenue. So we could accelerate a lot of our product development. But when you have an application, if you think about charging like 100K, you're like, wow, that's a lot of money to make off an application. But if you have a staff of 10, you might have annual expenses of 1.5 to 2 million, right? So if you have a 100K customer, this is that a tenth of covering it. This is a great deal. It's a great customer, but you have to charge a lot of money. And it might not seem like a lot when you have like 1 or 2 people, but it really catches up to you. So look around the market to see what comps would be fair and charge something at about that number. Even though this might be hard and you might not have the confidence, it's like, it's what you're willing to pay, right? And once a company is sufficiently big, if they have to pay 10, 20K for something, it like doesn't matter. It's like a number that doesn't matter to them. Like their department might have authorization to do it on their credit card.
Wow. Cool, Chris. Thank you so much for all these nuggets about how to start a $100 million startup. Thank you so much, guys. We have a second video coming up. Stay tuned. Watch that video. It's about another topic. It's a very happy topic, but it has a very like dark side to it. So see you guys in that video. All right.